hope lives, always. Even if the life that we live is not the same as it used to be. I want to share with you a story about a friend of mine named Mark. Mark was someone that went to my church growing up, a man that I kind of always knew who he was, and I didn't really know him very well until I was in the 8th grade and I went on a mission trip to Chicago where we did Bible school for local kids at a very small church in a suburb outside of the city. And that's when Mark and I got to know each other better. And I learned that all of Mark's life he had had health issues. He had had a kidney removed. He had had a transplant. He had all these things that he had had to deal with in his life. And he became someone that I could talk to when I was struggling. Because at that same time, my father was sick with cancer and would one day die from cancer while I was a teenager. And it was Mark who called me and consoled me in the midst of all of that. Well, many years later, Mark and I stayed in touch, and he had to have his leg amputated because of all the things that he was dealing with. He had now reached a point where he was going to dialysis every single week. And he was one of those people, and we all know somebody like that, that was just filled with faith and hope, even when life seemed to crash down around him constantly. And I went to visit him in the hospital after his amputation. And I talked to him and I said, what are you going to do now? And at this point I had no theological training, no pastoral care training. I don't know what to say to people in the hospital. I just wanted to visit my friend. And he looks at me and he says, I'm trying to figure out what God needs for me right now. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, I thought I knew what God needed, and I did what I thought God needed me to do when I had 2 legs. But now I imagine God's got other things in mind for me because I only have 1. I never really thought of it like that. The whole drive to the hospital and talking to him, I never processed that he would view what would certainly be a major shift in his life as an opportunity to do more and to care for people in a new and important way. It makes me look at what we're going through right now differently, having known Mark and seen what he endured and having heard and seen his response to his amputation. Yes, life doesn't look the same. Yes, the way we have to live is different. And we can look at that and concentrate on what's wrong and on what's broken. Or we can ask ourselves, well, what am I called to do now in the face of all that I'm undertaking? What ways am I called to share hope in new ways that I hadn't thought of before? I don't think there's any struggle that we undertake that makes us incapable of being used to bring hope and joy and love to other people. Because hope lives always.